Hi, and welcome to this Christmas special where I'm going to show you how to make a sparkling Christmas tree right in the worksheet in Microsoft Excel. It is so cool and it doesn't require any VBA programming or macros whatsoever. You can do all of this by hand, including make the lights flash. At the end, however, I will show you how to add these two cool buttons, which require a little tiny bit of code, but allow you to make the flashing stop or turn back on. Before we start, check the video description and click the link to Teach Excel so you can download the files for the tutorial and follow along. And make sure to subscribe and accept notifications so you can see all the new tutorials. We're going to start with a blank worksheet that looks just like this. It's amazing to think that we're going to go from this to this, but we really are, and it's just going to take a little bit of formatting and a formula. So let's begin with the formatting. First, select a bunch of columns. Don't worry too much if you select too many or too few. You can always fix that later. But you do want to try to select an odd number of columns. Select all of them using the column header and resize one, and it's going to resize all of them for us. And we're also going to resize the rows. But what I want to do first is to input the formula. And you're going to input this formula in the upper leftmost part of the area where you want your Christmas tree. We'll do that in C1, and I'm going to zoom in a bit so you can see the formula. It is a bit of a gnarly formula, and I'll cover it at the end of the tutorial, but all you need to do to change it for your workbook, for your Christmas tree, is to replace O1 with the column that is going to be the very center of your tree. And that's why you want to choose an odd number of columns so that you've got one that will serve as the center column, and then you have an even number of columns on the left and on the right. So for the columns I selected, column O is going to be the very middle column. So just change it to whatever is your middle column. Make sure you keep the dollar signs in there. That means the reference won't change when we move the formula around. And that's all you have to change for this formula. So if you don't want to learn about it, that's okay. Just change this and move on. Otherwise, I'll cover it at the end. So now we have it in C1. It's not going to output anything there. Let us zoom out. Okay. Copy the formula over to the right, the very end of where your tree will go. You'll notice we already have one cell fill in with a number. And copy it down now. Don't worry if you copy too many rows like I did right there. What we're going to do, you can start to see the Christmas shape take form right now and all these wacky numbers, which I'll explain in a moment. But what you want to do now is to cut off these extra rows that are unnecessary. I'm just going to go ahead and delete the formula, no big deal. And you can kind of start to see the Christmas tree taking shape, but it's a little bit too wide. So this is where we are going to resize the rows. Select the rows for the Christmas tree. Make one of them a little bit bigger. Maybe a little bigger. And then we can zoom out. Okay, maybe a little bigger. Basically, just make it so it looks like an actual Christmas tree. That's the whole point of this, and you might have to play around with it a little bit. You can see now it's starting to look a little bit more like a Christmas tree. And now it's time to use these numbers to make it actually look like a Christmas tree. So the numbers are what's going to tell Excel where to change the colors, where to put the colors. Basically, it is the tree. And this is the trick behind the tree, the Christmas tree. This dude up here, every one of these cells has a number in it. And that's how it works. So what we're going to do is we're going to use conditional formatting for this. And I'm going to use a custom formula for the first part. We're going to have two sets of conditional formatting to go over the tree. One for the color and one to make the lights appear. Now, if you've watched my tutorials, you know that I always recommend building your conditional formats here in the cell first, because we're going to use a custom formula, a conditional formatting custom formula. Build those here in the spreadsheet. Those have to evaluate to true or false, and you just want to make sure it's working before you go ahead and put it in there. So we are going to use isNumber. We just want to see the cells that have a number. That's going to allow us to color it green, and you want to start with cell C1. So equals isNumber C1. It's a little bit small there. Let me make it bigger. okay, equals is number C1. So the upper leftmost cell that contains a formula that built the Christmas tree. For us, that is C1. Hit enter, make sure it works. False, okie dokie. That's because C1 does not have a number in it. Now we shall copy this, and I will delete it. And what we're going to do is to apply this to the area where we have the formulas that build the Christmas tree. So we start with C1, select everything. Oops, okay, select everything. Go to the Home tab, Conditional Formatting, New Rule, and I'm going to use a formula to determine which cells to format. You could probably use one of the more basic options, but I prefer to use custom formulas. It makes life a little bit easier for customizing things. So just paste this in here. Equals is number C1. Remember, no dollar signs in front of the C or the 1. We want it to be relative, so it will, the cell reference, relative cell reference, so it will change for the entire Christmas tree. And if that's a little confusing, just watch a tutorial on absolute versus relative cell references and you'll get it pretty quickly. But now we go to format. So we want to change the font and the fill color because you want the background to be green, but you also want the numbers to be the same color as the background so you cannot see them. So first let's go to fill, select more colors, go to the standard tab. It'll make matching these up a little bit easier. Choose the green you want, hit OK. Then go to font, go down here. You can select from recent colors, or if you select a color here first and it's not in recent colors, just go to more colors, standard, select the same green, OK. OK. Now hit OK once more, and OK again, and we start to have a Christmas tree. Oh, that's so cool. You can't see the numbers. We built the Christmas tree, and we built it using a formula and conditional formatting. Now it's time to add the lights. And this is actually really, really easy in any newer version of Excel. So we select the Christmas tree, all the cells once again, the corner to the corner. Go to conditional formatting. This time go to icon sets and choose an icon. Perfect. Now all you have to do to make it flash is hit F9. F9, 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 or hold it down, and the tree flashes. How cool is that? I love it. It's great. So what F9 does is it recalculates the sheet. So in the formula that we have here, let's look up to the formula bar this time. It's either going to output nothing, or it's going to output rand between. Here it's going to output a number that's 1, 2, or 3. And so every time that we recalculate the sheet, this will output a different result, a 1, a 2, or a 3 in the cell. So that's why F9 will make the lights flash. And you can see F9 if you go to the Formulas tab over here for calculation options. You could click this right here, Calculate Now, F9, and it would do the same thing. So in a moment when we add the macro for the buttons, all the macro is going to do is to calculate the sheet. It's the same thing as pressing F9, except for you don't have to do it. The macro will just keep running until you press the stop button. Now let's finish up the formatting before we do the macro. Okay, we want to add a stump, be like this and this. Then go to the Home tab, get a stump looking color. In recent colors, you can see the one I used, but go to more colors and you'll find a good brown right there. Hit OK. Now, let's go to the View tab, remove the formula bar, remove the headings, and remove the grid lines, and get this guy to go away. And check it out. There is our Christmas tree. Let's get the cell selection off the screen. Okay. Now we have a beautiful, lovely, amazing Christmas tree. It's so cool. Now let's add a little macro that'll make the lights flash on its own, and then the buttons to control the macro. So hit Alt F11 on the keyboard. And if you downloaded this workbook, which you should do, no point in typing all this out by hand, open up the modules folder and then open up module 1, and you're going to see this macro right here. And you can copy and paste this into your workbook. It's really, really simple. I just copied it from the countdown timer tutorial, that macro, and made a few tiny little changes. And the main change here is that we calculate the worksheet. So this right here, calculate, will recalculate the currently visible worksheet. Now, I'm not going to explain the rest of the macro in depth. Watch the countdown timer tutorial if you want that. But basically, this is how often the Christmas tree will flash its lights. Right now, it's set to 1 second. This line is the one that makes this run every second. And this line down here is the one that stops it. So application.onTime, blah, blah, blah. We want to stop the timer from running. And do make sure that you copy this. You need the interval as a public variable so that both macros can use it. But like I said, I'm not going to talk anymore about the macro. Copy paste the guy, change the seconds to whatever you want. And now let's go attach some buttons to it. So let's go to Insert, Illustrations, Shapes, Rounded Rectangle, make a button, change the formatting, make it a bit more Christmassy, maybe, okay, sparkle. Now type it in there, hit the escape key, go to the Home tab, let's change the formatting, make it bigger, bold, and in the middle. Then copy and paste. Use the arrow keys to align the second button. Change the texts. Hit the escape key to get out of there. Everything looks almost about right. So right-click the sparkle button and go to Assign Macro, Timer, OK. Right-click the Stop button, Assign Macro, Stop Timer, OK. Now let's get this out of the way. Click away. Click Sparkle. Bam! A Christmas tree flashing in the worksheet. Oh my gosh, I love this. And when we want to stop it. So that is all there is to it. It's one formula, 2 conditional formatting rules, and if you want to make it automatically work, then you can add a button, 2 buttons, with very simple VBA code. And of course, you can download this workbook and just run it on your own. You don't have to change anything if you just want a little flashing Christmas tree on your desktop. But now for everyone who wants to learn how to use the formula that allowed us to create the Christmas tree, let's open up a new worksheet and talk about that. Okay, so I've tried to think about the best way to explain how the formula works. And I'll go something like this. Let's start with A1, and let's make a little bit of a smaller Christmas tree. Let's make D to be the middle, and I will zoom in. Okay, so we want to go here and down here. Okay, delete the excess. So what are we trying to do? Think about it this way. We want to have a line down the middle, and we want to have an equal number of columns with values in them to the left of this line and to the right of this line. That is all that we are trying to do. So let us dig into the formula. I'm going to try and make it real big here. Okay. This is first and foremost just an if statement. Let's talk about what it's going to output first, then we'll get to the meat of it. So it's either going to output nothing, so a blank space, emptiness, nothing, or the numbers 1, 2, or 3. Here we have the rand between function, and the lowest number that it can output is a 1, the highest number is a 3. So how do we decide if we want to output a random number, 1, 2, 3, or nothing? That is this dude right here. And this section is responsible for comparing the columns with the rows. So the column number with the row number to see if it's allowed to have a value in it. and we encase the column check with the absolute value function just to make sure that if it's a negative number, we change it to a positive number. So we want values to the left and to the right of this center column. So half the values will come out positive, half of them will come out negative, but we need a positive value in order to do the calculation correctly. Okay, so it's a little confusing. Let me try to explain it. We use the central column as the kind of comparison column. So in this case, column D. Then we subtract, so that returns a number, the number of the column, which in this case is 4, because D is the fourth letter of the alphabet, fourth column. Then we subtract the current column, the column that this formula is currently in. You get the current column if you do not have a cell reference within the column function. Then we just compare it, so see if it's less than or equal to the current row, so the number of the row, if there's no row reference, it's the current row, minus 1. So let's get out of the formula and talk about how that works. So this is the first row, the top of the tree, and we have our central column. Do we want a value in a column to the left of it or to the right of it? No. When we go down one row, we do want a value in one column to the left and one column to the right. When we go down 2 rows, we want 2 values to the left and 2 to the right. So let's evaluate a formula. If I open the formula up like this and I select this and I hit F9, it's a pretty cool little feature, it'll calculate the result. So the row formula function right there will return 1 because we are in the first row. So we have 1 minus 1, which will be 0. So if I back that up and calculate this, we will get 0. Now over here, we have column D. You give it a cell reference, so that's why it's D1, not just column D. And that'll equal 4. And the current column, which is also D, so it's going to equal 4. So 4 minus 4 will equal 0. Is 0 less than or equal to 0? Well, yeah, it's equal to it. So it equals true. So it will output a random number 1, 2, or 3. I'm going to hit escape to get out of this. Now if I go out 1 and do it this way, column D1 minus the current column, well, it'll be 4 minus 3. That will equal 1. Evaluate this. 1. Is it less than or equal to the row minus 1? Well, that's going to be a 0. No. And the absolute value function, which I'm not calculating here, is just going to make 1, 1. It's not going to do anything here. But notice that when we go to the right and we calculate this, it will equal negative 1, which is less than or equal to 0 until we apply the absolute value function, which changes the negative 1 into a positive 1. So that's why we need the absolute value function, and you can start to see how it's going to work. So let's go down 1, and let's go here. We are going to run the columns. It should return a 1, 1. This time our row is row 2. We subtract 1, that gives us 1, just like that. So does 1 equal, or is 1 less than or equal to 1? Yes, it is. So we can output a value here. But when we go over here, this will return 2. And this, once again, will return 1. Is 2 less than or equal to 1? No, it isn't. But when we go down here, this right here will still be 2. But this now, instead of being 1, will also be 2. Is 2 less than or equal to 2? Yes, it is. So I'm not going to keep going through it. What I'm hoping is that you can see the pattern here. We are comparing the current column with the central column and using the current row minus 1 as the limiter. So we can never expand beyond the current row minus 1 as far as the columns are concerned. I know that this is a very confusing formula, even when I go through explaining it, but I think if you build a baby Christmas tree like this and you go through it like I am now, you will notice the pattern of how the rows and the column numbers are changing, and that will kind of help you learn how it works. At least that's what I hope. And you can see now why I included this at the end of the tutorial and not the beginning or the middle of it. But honestly, it'll be just so much easier if you don't worry about this formula unless you're really curious. And you just copy paste it into your workbook and change this to the central column. And just put your Christmas tree in row 1 and you don't have to worry about anything else. Let's go back to the Christmas tree. Let's take a look at our final result. After dealing with formulas, we get a beautiful, lovely, happy, flashing Christmas tree. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you have a Merry Christmas and an amazing holiday season. I hope you liked the tutorial. If it was helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and make sure to subscribe and accept notifications so you can see all the new tutorials.